Okay, hi everybody. Welcome. Today is August 19th, 2020. I am Ishan, CTO at Moovweb. With me today are Mark, our VP of Engineering, and Yvonne, our Director of Engineering, who are going to take us through this every 2 weeks update on the Moovweb XDN. Yvonne, take it away.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you, Sean. So today's, let's talk about first the version of the XDN. We were 2 weeks ago when we are on our last update, we were at 145.5. In the meantime, we have released version 2. We will talk more about that today. And we are currently at 2.1.0, which we released just yesterday. So improvements and fixes, some of these got into 1.x, but most of them are for 2.x. The breaking changes in version 2, we switched to express route path syntax, and now we are compatible with that. Service worker now supports custom cache key. So where we used to define the custom cache key only for the edge, now it's defined for the cache and service worker, for the edge and service worker. And these have to have the same custom caching keys. So they are now defined at the top level of the root of the options project for the caching. We deprecated, a long time ago, we deprecated create custom cache key, and that has now been removed. We improved the support for Nuxt. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Deep fetch based on JSON results plus cores options on prefetching, so improvements on prefetching. Support for Nuxt, for Next 9.5 rewrites and redirects. And finally, we added a transform request. There was already a transform response to proxy options, which allowed you to transform whatever was the response from the proxied upstream. Now you can transform requests if it needs more elaborate transformations than what we offer out of the box. You can just now intercept that and write your own code around that. We fixed the access log format. It was previously it had a header and a JSON line. Now it's just a pure JSON line that incorporates all the information that was in the header. We fixed a couple of issues on builds around the Angular builds and builds on failures for larger routers. XDN 2.0 syntax change. Mark, do you want to take it away here?
So as Yvonne mentioned, we switched to using the same underlying library that Express uses. So it's probably the most popular routing syntax, at least in the JavaScript world. That library is called path to regex. And so now any path pattern that you could use in Express, you could use in the XDN. And so the one breaking change there that is likely to affect existing products is the way that you capture multiple path tokens, or sometimes we call that like catch-all or splat variables. So it used to just be star in the variable name, and now it's colon star, colon variable name star, which is what Express uses. The syntax that we used to use was from a different library that was slightly less popular, but it was very similar. So that's likely the only change that you would need to make in your router to support the new syntax.
Okay, thanks.
And before we go any further, I just want to clarify, this is a change that we're not forcing you into underneath you, not pulling the rug out. You have to go and update your package JSON to say new version XDN 2. If you don't change your package JSON, if you don't redeploy, then you don't have to worry about anything. This is something you should take into account when you're upgrading, but this upgrade doesn't happen without you knowing. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear.
Okay, so you'll see now why we made this choice to upgrade or change the routing syntax to match Express. So Nuxt.js released a feature that had been, wrong framework. Nuxt
Sorry.
Nuxt and Next. We have an update for Next as well. Both Nuxt and Next make use of this new path format. So for Nuxt.js, the Vue framework, we overhauled our support for it in version 2 and made some things easier to configure. So now there's a Nuxt module that builds a service worker for you that enables prefetching and also injects it into the browser code so it installs it properly. And we also added support for extending the Nuxt router to add like additional routes or additional aliases for pages. Something very similar actually to what I'm going to talk about in the next slide, which is Next.js rewrites. So we did a refresh on our Nuxt.js support, and you'll notice the path syntax that Nuxt uses in extending the router is express path syntax. And so that was one of the motivating reasons for us supporting express syntax as our native syntax. It just makes it a lot easier to integrate with these libraries that also use that syntax. So next slide. Okay, now Next.js. So Next had this experimental feature for a few releases, rewrites and redirects to make the Next router a lot more flexible. That was one of the chief complaints about Next, is that the router is like really good if you're starting a new project with no history, but if you need to support non-standard routes or need to preserve SEO from a previous version of your application, it's pretty difficult. So Next has largely fixed that with this new rewrites and redirects feature. So rewrites allows you to essentially like declare an alias for a page. So you can say, for a given URL pattern, actually render this other page pattern. So in this case, let's say that your page was in a directory called P, and then the file name was id.js. You could say, we're also going to render that when the URL is /products and then the ID. And then redirects allows you to send an HTTP redirect, either permanent or not permanent, from a given URL to a given URL, and also including variables there. So the Next routes middleware for XDN now supports both of those automatically. You don't have to do any configuration. It just automatically adds them to the XDN router. And the nice thing is things like redirects are performed at the network edge. So they're like really instant. So that was added in 2.0 as well.
Yeah, Mark, looking at this, no one needs to switch to rewrites if they already had vanity routes in our router. This is just like, if you already have this, we will support it as well.
That's correct. Yeah, and I think it's more likely, especially with people that have existing Next.js apps, to just use this feature. We've already seen that with several users in the last week, that this is a very popular feature. I think it's something that the Next community has been begging for a long time. And so it doesn't really matter whether you add those routes directly in the router or you just use rewrites. We're fine with either. And I suspect many users will just stay within Next land and just use the rewrites or redirects within their Next config.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. All right, so continue now with the XDN developer console. We have had multiple, we're working on the improvements. These are minor, while we're working on major features, we're working on these minor improvements. And we just improved a little bit the copy environments UI that we demoed 2 weeks ago, and then the split testing UI as well. There was a bug that we weren't showing split testing on default environments. That has been fixed now. So if you only have a default environment, you can now test the split testing as well. And Isha, now I'm going to leave it to you to demo the contribution to how to contribute to the XDN developer docs.
Yeah, thank you guys. Let me bring up my screen and talk about developer.moovweb and contributing to it. So there we go. So our developer documentation, developer.moovweb.com, is actually fully open. It's hosted on this site that you guys go to read our documentation is actually hosted right here in GitHub. You can see the entire source of it, and I'll walk you through that in a little bit. But even more than that, you can contribute to it. And we actually had just last week a contribution come in for a bug fix, or really a typo in one of our documentation. We'd actually changed the output of one of the commands, and somebody noticed that the documentation didn't update to reflect that, and submitted a pull request. So we want to make sure more folks understood how to do this. And if you're used to contributing, to an open source repository in GitHub, then this flow is going to feel very familiar, but not everybody does. So we're going to just walk you through that and talk through the architecture of it. So what I've got here is some of this I've set up so you don't have to wait for an npm install. So I'll give you a video of me going through basically the first step of this guide. So the first step you'll want to do if you want to contribute, go here, click on contributing. And the first thing you want to do is clone the repository locally. Actually, I take that back. The first thing what you want to do is go to the repository in GitHub. Here I'm signed in, not as me, but as this developer Dan persona. And I just go to the repository in GitHub, and then I click fork in the upper right, and I fork the repository into my GitHub space, which you'll see happen. And that only takes a few seconds. We can fast forward. So there, once it's sitting in my fork, the next thing I'll do is the next thing here, which is cloning it locally. So that's what you'll see here next. We do a git clone, pulls it in, and then we cd into the directory and run npm install, which are basically those two next steps here. And the reason for the video is just so you guys don't have to sit through another 5 minutes of waiting for that npm install to happen. So with that, I'll take over and do the rest of this live. So let's pull up this directory, and we will open it in Visual Studio Code. And I will also take you through starting the server locally. So just do npm start. So let's do that. And while we're waiting for that to come up, I'll take you through just a quick guide of the code. So most of the content that you see here on developer.moovweb.com is stored as guides, which are basically one large markdown file. So let's take a look at this very page itself. You'll see there's a contributing guide. Click on that, and this is all in Markdown. So it should be very straightforward and easy for folks to edit and modify. And then the guides themselves, this sidebar that you see here, is populated through this guides.json file. And basically what happens is if you want to modify an existing page, you can go here, find the corresponding guide that you want, pull it up, and then go start modifying it. If you need to add a new guide, then what you'd basically do is create a new Markdown file, and then basically add it in here into guides.json. So let's see, I think XDN should have started up. We'll pull this up, and we should be able to see it running locally here. And while we're waiting for that to come up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to add an edit. And we'll do this live here. Let's see. So I've saved this ahead of time, though. Nope. There we go. No. I just deleted the file I wanted to save. OK, well, I have a backup of it. Give me a second. Okay, there we go. So let's make a quick modification to this. And I've just added an additional line for those who don't know how to do all of these steps. The Pro Git book has a really decent guide that walks you through step by step, basically what we're doing today, which is how to submit a pull request through GitHub with lots of nice screenshots. So we're going to add that to make this guide a little more helpful to folks. And then let's save that change. We'll go here. So this is, you'll notice now we're running locally, and we should be able to see our change. Give it a sec to compile. There we go. We can see our change right there. Okay. So now what I'm just going to do is go here. You can do this from the command line if you want. I'm just going to commit it in Git. I'll say added link on how to submit a PR to the contributing guide. And yeah, I'm over 50 characters. That's fine. Okay, and now let's push this and then wait for it to push up. Maybe there's been a change since I did this. There probably has. Git pull. Let's take a look. Okay, git push. Why is permission denied? Well, let's see.
Maybe your default SSH key is for a different user.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Okay, 1 second here. So
if you can switch that on the phone,
I know what
better
happened.
man than I. That's a tricky configuration to get.
Yeah, it's git config global. So it's let's see, git config username. That's probably what it is. So developer Dan, and then git config global user.email and developer.dan@moovweb.com. There we go. Well, what's going to be fun is, well, let's see, git push. Let's see if this works now. It still failed. Let's figure out why this is. Well, you know what, we're going to do it a different way. We'll figure out why that push failed a different way later. We're just going to go in here and go to the contributing guide. And we'll take this change and we'll do it through the interface. So let's do that.
You're actually on the Moovweb fork. Do you want to be on the? On
oh, I am. Thank you. Thank you. GitHub. Thank you. That's why I didn't have the edit there. This is why I think that we're failing. It's potentially because we're behind with some edit. But we'll do it this way. Contributing. We're going to show you the alternate way you can do this if you don't care to run it locally. So we've added that change and then added a link how to submit a PR to contributing guide. And then we'll actually contribute this directly. And then go back here and we can create a pull request. So this is our pull request. We're going to submit this pull request to the Moovweb docs version. So I'll hit create pull request right here. And now you'll notice here on Moovweb docs, XDN docs, you can see this pull request right here, which we've submitted publicly in our list of pull requests. And then someone from Moovweb would come and take a review and give you comments. So that's basically how to submit a fix to the XDN docs.
Nice.
Okay.
Thank you, Sean.
So now questions and answers. Let's see. So first question is, and reminder, you can put questions into the chat. First question was, what was the motivation for XDN 2.0 and its breaking changes? Was it simply to support the new Nuxt features or something else?
I think it's a thing we've been thinking about for a while, bringing it more in line with Express in general, because Express is just so popular, both as a library, but the underlying library, path2regex, that does the parsing of route paths just crops up everywhere. And so we saw it being supported in Next.js's rewrites, which is interesting because Next.js's own pattern syntax that they kind of use in their directory structure isn't the Express pattern syntax. But when you're defining rewrites in the Next config, it is. So even they, acknowledge that this thing is very standard. So, it's supported by Next, it's supported by Nuxt, it's probably supported by frameworks of the future. And I think it's just the path of least surprise for developers that are new to the platform. And so for all those reasons, which, accumulate as a better user experience, we chose to make this change.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what are the best practices to follow when submitting a pull request to the docs in terms of style? And what happens when you submit a PR? So we don't actually have a style guide in the contributing document. We probably should. That's a really good call out. We'll add something there on what you should do in terms of style. In terms of what happens next, basically one of us will come through, take a look at the change and give you some comments and either approve or reject it. But you'll have full transparency through GitHub on how that changes. One thing that might be useful, and maybe we should do this next time, Yvonne, is walk folks through, how it looks from our side inside the XDN. It'd be kind of good demo use case.
Agreed.
Of that setup.
Especially for docs, which is, public, and then everybody can see the public side of the GitHub setup, and then we can show how that fits into the deployments, and then how that fits into how does it look from the XDN side of the things once the integration is complete, which it is in the docs.
Yeah, it'd be really great to give folks a model of what a good project setup looks like.
All right, sounds good. Let's do that in 2 weeks on the next product update.
Yeah. Okay, next question. If a rewrite is defined in Next, does a visit to the source also create a cache hit for a visit to the destination?
No, they are, the URL is the major component of the key. And so those are cached under two separate keys. So you'd have to visit both in order to get hits on both.
Okay. Is that something we'd want to support down the line?
I don't know, because it's possible that the underlying code could treat those differently. So it probably is not the safest thing in the world.
Yeah, not by default.
Not by default, that makes sense. Yeah, but maybe some way to opt into that. Okay, great. I think that's it for questions today, and we're almost at time. So thank you, Mark and Yvonne, and thanks everybody for participating, and we'll talk to you all in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Sean.